I want all the young families, the new people that are coming, to be able to look at our story and realize that will be their story in 100 years as well.
Elder Hirata, who is the elder at the Suginami Church, said, please tell this story to the missionaries and supporting churches in America to say thank you, for them to see the long-range effects of missionary work in Japan. Well, we're Bruce and Susan Young, and missionaries with MTW. Started out in 1974. Been to Japan, worked in Japan for 30 years. And for the last 14 years or so, we've been involved in helping new missionaries get ready for the field.
But what I love about your story is that it takes place over such a great period of time. Mm-hmm. And so, can you where does the story begin? How do we get to missions in Japan?
I would say it starts in 1892 when this one young Japanese teenager boy is sent to Boston area Wesleyan Academy High School to learn English so that he can become a silk merchant in New York City.
私の名前は平田拓夫です。で、うちの母のメイドンネームが伊藤です。で、その母の母、僕のおばあちゃんが伊藤節子です。おじいさんのお父さん、ひいおじいさんはシルクを、絹をアメリカに輸出していました。それで、輸出のし始めですよね。で、おじいさんはその家業のシルクの輸出を助けるためにニューヨークに行って、シルクの輸入の仕事を始めました。そのためにアメリカに渡りました。
After graduating from school, he moved to New York, set up in Brooklyn, had a house, went back to Japan and married a woman. And that first wife got pneumonia and died very suddenly. Back then, it was a custom of the family, if a girl died, the next girl in the family automatically was responsible to marry and take the place of the sister.
それで日本に戻って、その妹である僕のおばあさんをまた、と結婚して、またニューヨークに連れて帰ったんです。だからおばあさんはお姉さんが死んでしまったために、おじいさんのお嫁さんになったわけです。おじいさんが42歳の時、おばあさんは17歳。
We have pictures of New York City back then. It looks a little different. But she lived there, and they had 4 children. They drove around in like a Rolls-Royce car and attended country clubs and lived really a high life.
その時まではもうゴールデンエイジだったんです、絹のね。で、今日本の輸出で、自動車がねメインな輸出ですけど、戦争第二次大戦前は絹が日本の貿易の主たるものでした。
In mid-30s, 1930s, they went back to Japan.
Mr. Ito contracted tuberculosis. And so because of that, they returned to Yokkaichi, and he died. Their infant son also died, and the war broke out.
When the war broke out, their oldest son was sent off to the war and dies right away, is killed. So Mrs. Ito is left with only 3 daughters.
そして残されたのが、娘3人と息子1人で、娘3人は結婚して家を出てしまう。で、息子は第二次大戦でフィリピンで戦死してしまうんです。で、おばあさんは1人残ったわけです。
She was left in a house that they had built, which was fairly Western for that time, filled with huge mahogany furniture and a tiger skin rug, which my kids love to play on. And she lived there with her 3 daughters, who eventually married and left. And so there she was, a widow in this big house, all alone. And then, until the terrorizing young children came to live.
We made a really lively house there.
So Bruce's parents went to Manchuria as missionaries originally, and the war broke out, World War II, so they came home to the United States, where Bruce's dad pastored in Pennsylvania, and that's when Bruce was born. When he was 6 months old, they were able to return to China. They went to Nanking and lived there for almost a year, and then the communists came, and they had to flee for the sake of believers in China. In God's providence, there was a woman who sent them a $20 bill in an envelope, and that arrived and was worth a lot more than Chinese money.
Sent by sea mail 6 weeks later, just in time. What a coincidence,
Just in
right?
time. Yeah, right. And made it possible for them to be able to buy the tickets they needed. Half part of the family went by boat on the Yangtze River, and part of the family flew. They met in Shanghai and were able to get a military plane out of there. But there was some question about whether or not they would go to the States or go to Japan, because the situation in Japan, housing and whatnot, was an issue.
The Foxwell family, who had arrived in Japan in February of 48, and then had moved down to the city of Yokkaichi, they had a truck and they had to bring their own 20-foot small trailer to live out of because there was just no housing available. They were the ones that were able to find a house for us just like a couple days before we had to make a decision, fly back to the United States or go to Japan. And it was through that contact that Mrs. Ito was asked, would you be willing to have this missionary family stay with you?
おじいさんが亡くなって、そして、第二次世界大戦が始まって、息子がもう死んでしまうんですよ。で、うちの母親を含む3人の娘をもう結婚して、おばあちゃん1人に家にいたところに終戦になったわけです。で、終戦になって戦争が終わって、日本に、マッカーサーがね、ジェネラル・マッカーサーがミッショナリーをアメリカからたくさんよこせというんで、いろんなミッショナリーが来たんです。それはジョン・ヤングさんがおばあちゃんの家に来て宣教を開始したから、当然おばあちゃんはそのリビングルームを教会にしたわけですから、教会のお手伝いをして、そしてクリスチャンになりました。最初の8人です。
So we moved in, and shortly after, the Lord had just prepared her heart, and she became a Christian. She was the first convert baptized. And as we met in her home for the first a year or so, she just opened up her home, and we'd have a flood of Japanese kids come in. Back then, there was nothing, for entertaining
No TV,
children. So if you told Bible stories and had these flashcards and stuff, they were excited to come. So we filled her house every Sunday morning with Sunday school, and then started worship services there.
Mm-hmm. We have one slide of her burning, when she became a believer, taking her God box out and burning it in the street. And I mean, that's a strong testimony. She had I think they were tea bushes on the hill by her house that said, God is love. She made the bushes take the shape of that. And there wasn't a whole lot in Yokkaichi in those days. The Ichigo-sen, Highway 1, it was just a gravel road. And there were only 2 cars in Yokkaichi when they were there. And one belonged to the Foxwells, and one belonged to the Shiakusho, the city office. So now, you have Nissan made in Suzuka and Toyota.
Yeah, it's,
right?
it's an automobile center.
They ship cars out of there all the time, but at that point there were just the two cars.
And it's kind of the suburbs. It's a very, very traditional temples and shrines and everything. So to become a Christian and to be so bold in her action to even go out and burn that God box in public like that.
非常にその四日市はね保守的なところなので難しいんですけれども、終戦後先ほど申し上げたようにマッカーサーが非常にキリスト教伝道に関して積極的だったので、人々は比較的ね保守的であったけれども、新しいその終戦、もう戦争が終わったということで、キリスト教を受け入れる下地はあったと思います。
So the church started in Mrs. Ito's house in Yokkaichi, but a year later, Bruce's dad and Mr. Foxwell were asked to come to Tokyo to start a seminary because there were men who wanted to train for the ministry. And so both families moved to Tokyo. The seminary was started.
And seminary students would come down on a overnight sleeper train from Tokyo on the steam engines down to Nagoya and then to Yokkaichi and spend the weekend there, preach and teach, and then go back to Tokyo to the seminary. So that's how it continued for almost 10 years in that city. The first graduate, Mr. Obata, went to Yokkaichi, and he became like the pastor. Then when he moved on, Pastor Horikoshi moved to Yokkaichi. And all throughout Japan, if you ask if you know Horikoshi Sensei, they've all read one of his 10 or 12 books that he's written. So
Horikoshi Sensei was the son of a Shinto priest. He was training to be a kamikaze pilot at the end of the war, and thank goodness the war ended before he did that. He flew as one, and became a Christian.
yeah, one day he was a hero, and next day he was the bottom of the pile. So he thought, what is reality all about? And so he was befriended by a Christian in Tokyo, a pastor, and said, come live with me for a while, and stuck him in his library and started reading all the books, and that's how he became a Christian and it ended up in Yokkaichi as the pastor. But he was in line of about 400 years of history of the Shinto shrine out in the Gunma prefecture. And so his story is amazing, but his dad became disillusioned with Shintoism as well. And before he passed away, he became a Christian member of the Yokkaichi Church, and they went back and took a bulldozer and bulldozed down the Shinto shrine of 400 years history, just leveled it. And it's the kind of guys those he and his dad were. They were not half-hearted about anything.
As a kamikaze pilot, you can't be half-hearted, I guess. So your family has moved to Tokyo, started seminary, and you end up coming back to the States for college, am I?
Yeah, I went back and went to Covenant College and seminary. I took a year out of seminary and went back again just to confirm that call. And my year back in Japan, going to the Yokkaichi Church and serving under Pastor Horikoshi, I
Where
learned
did you live for that year?
on top of the church.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a little room up there that I lived in. Because I took a year out, I met Susan. I wouldn't have met her otherwise, because I was a senior that year, and my last semester at Covenant, Susan decided to take courses at the nearby seminary. She just lived a few miles away, and because of that, we met.
you ended up back in Yokkaichi. Is that at that point? I mean,
Yeah, after we did language school in Tokyo, for 2 years. I did 1 year and a baby, and then we moved to Yokkaichi in September of 1978. The nearest missionaries to us at the beginning were over an hour away and in a totally different denomination and everything. So there was no one else to speak English with even. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was really, really good. Yeah.
Our mission started growing. We went out under a different organization, not Mission to the World, but World Presbyterian Mission.
Well, there
which
was no
the
MTW.
that was in the 70s and early 80s. And then in 82 we joined the PCA denomination and became a Mission to the World. And they were committed to team ministry, so we were asked to form a team and move to Nagoya City to do a church plant work there. And then meanwhile, a few years later, Dan Iverson and Tom Patton and that group started in Chiba, and they started their work there. So we officially became 2 church plants. And the seminary pretty much was indigenous work. It was staffed only by Japanese professors at that point. So our focus changed from seminary training plus church work to all church planting, until a few years later, the Nagoya one of the Nagoya teams started the Chubu Bible Institute, which is now the seminary in Nagoya. So we've kind of gone through phases that way, from being primarily a seminary to then primarily church planting, and now we're doing both. As we moved from there, the Newsoms took over the team leadership, and they started another church called the Nishin Church, which is growing and doing really well today. We then moved to Tokyo, and we're working in Tokyo for the last 10 years.
One of the first things I did when I married Bruce and we went to Japan was to go meet Mrs. Ito, who is kind of famous in our family. And one of the last things we did before we left was do marriage counseling for her great-granddaughter. It was really, really special. And I remember we were standing around at their wedding reception, and her 2 great aunts were there. And they looked at us and they said, "Because you're here, we're here." Meaning as Christian brothers and sisters together. Yeah. So that was really, really special.
It's like full circle.
Yeah, it was
it comes full circle after from 1948
You're gonna make me cry.
that was 1948 to 2003. So
yeah.
Yeah.
それで私はこうやって全部つながってるんだなと。ジョン・ヤングさんが上陸した、そして娘が結婚して、今ここに至ってるっていうのがずっとつながってるんだな、おばあちゃんつながりで。宣教師さんにね、ぜひ言いたいことはね、宣教師さんがされたことを今、例えばジョン・ヤングさんがアメリカ、1948年に日本に来てまいた種がどのようにね育つかをね全然分からずに多分もう亡くなられてると思うんですよ。
When we first went to Japan, it was the Foxwells. They were still there, Bruce and I, and one other single missionary. And we looked at these 5 people and we're like, we need to pray for more missionaries to come to Japan. Yeah, we could count them on one hand. And so we began to pray. And never did we ever imagine.
Well, MacArthur's call was, he says, what Japan needs today is to replace every single missionary with 1,000 new ones, so that would be tens of thousands of missionaries, I guess. But what ended up being was the missionary population, evangelical missionary population, grew to be about 1,000 members. And that was through the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, the missionary population dropped. And then as the yen became strong and the dollar weak, it even became worse. Some big organizations decided that it was just not efficient to send all the money to a country of Japan where there's such slow growth and stuff. And so they started allocating their funds elsewhere, and the missionary population continued to drop. In the midst of all that, our mission grew just from one handful to a dozen or so. Today, I think we have close to maybe 80 career missionaries in Japan. It's the largest mission field with MTW. This in spite of the fact that other missions have dropped, the expenses have continued to rise. Support accounts to raise that money is hard, but God's honored it, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing.
だから私はね、そのアメリカでそのミッショナリーの人の援助をするということが結果としてどういうことになってるかっていうことをね知らせるためにこのストーリーはねとっても重要だと思います。まかれた種はちゃんと育ってるんですよと。わからないところでちゃんと育っているんですけれども、それをずっと70年間のつなぎ合わせで見るとこのように育ったんだっていうのが分かると思うんですけど、私の話で。